Today is April 15th, 2024. I'm Cameron Wood here at the Ohio History Connection with Bill Hoover, and we are going to talk today about the formation of the Kent Gay Liberation Front. Mr. Hoover, can you please say and spell your name for me?
It's William Hoover, Hoover.
Thank you. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Canton, Ohio in 1948. My parents all came from West Virginia. My mom had 8 brothers and 8 sisters. My dad had 5 brothers, and they all came to Canton. My mom and my dad's brothers, they came to Canton at the end of the Second World War because we used to make a joke in West Virginia, they taught reading, writing, and Route 21. So Canton had a lot of the people that worked in the automobile industries and so forth who were active in the UAW and so forth. And then Akron had a lot of people who came from West Virginia who worked in the rubber industry. So you had to deal with the fact when I came out in Canton, there were 6 gay bars, but that was because the little story I told earlier about you're not going out in your own city. The gay bars in Canton at that time, when you went to them, they were either named by a number or they had a little thing in the window that they opened like this and looked in. If you knew somebody, you could get in. If you didn't, you had to name 3 gay bars, blah, blah. And then also they were very careful. If a cop came into the bar, people would cease dancing and so forth. Now, in Ohio, you could dance, but in Pennsylvania, you couldn't back then. If you were they had a blue light at the door, so in a lot of gay bars. So if there was somebody in the bar who the ownership did not know or people thought might be from liquor board or from police department or something, and they would put the blue light on and that said stop dancing. That was true at a bar in Erie, Pennsylvania called Washington Bar. They did a thaw in and a thaw out picnic. So one of the things that the people in Canton did at the bars, twice a year, Memorial Day and Labor Day, they would have thaw in and thaw out. That's a big picnic that they had up in Erie, Pennsylvania. The hotels and motels all in that area would be filled with gay people. It would shock the Erie. And they would hold a picnic at the state park up there in Pymatuna, I think was the name of the state park up there, I think. Okay, that's where it was. And they would have games and, it would be an annual thing. But when you were at the bar there, if the light went on, you had to stop dancing because Pennsylvania still had the no, 2 guys couldn't dance together kind of thing. So these were issues that when I came out, you were pretty much, I never really had, I don't know why, I'm not a sociopath, but for whatever reason, I never felt really like I should be defending who I am. I'm who I am, and if you don't like it, I can't help that. And that was an attitude I had. I don't know exactly how I got that attitude, but my parents were pretty strong-willed. I tell this one story about Lee. He's probably going to get me for this. But anyway, what happened was my parents were avid card players. And they dealt with a lot of different people, so they had like a little bit more of a range of friends. And also they took it serious. So first time I took Lee home to meet them, of course, when you were grandkids like this or kids, you were playing cards by the time you were 5 and 6 in our house. So Lee came, and of course they got us into a card game. Next day, phone rings, and it's my mom calling, and she says, "Well, we like Lee, but we have one problem." And I'm thinking, oh boy, what could that be? And then she says, "He plays cards like a girl." So I told my mom, I said, "You're a pretty good player." So then a couple days later, she calls me back again. And she says, "Listen, sorry about that, but," she says, "one other thing is we would really be unhappy if you did a certain, you got entangled with a certain type." And I'm thinking, now who could that be? Now remember, this is in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. Okay, so she said it would be as if you ever brought home a Republican as your other half, we couldn't deal with that. Now the reason they said that was at that time, West Virginia had Kennedy's picture on every wall, anybody's house you went to in the living room, because he was the Democrat to end all Democrats as far as West Virginians were concerned back then. And my dad belonged to the Union, and I grew up in a Union family. So we did deal with unions on this issue, the issue of gay rights. And my parents basically they were not just very vocal. They basically just supported who I was and whatever. They treated Lee like part of the family, but they never talked about it. It just was. This is the way it is. My mom one time said, "Well, there was a guy who lived down the holler, who never got married and whatever." And I found out, I believe that guy William is who I'm named after. He never got married. He was my mom's uncle, and he raised her and a couple of the kids. So I think he may have been in the same category I was in. Never talked about that, but that's what I thought. And then as far as Canton goes, we basically had the bars that were there were gay friendly, obviously, and they were all secretive, though, in a lot of ways. They first had the little thing in the window, and they used to have basic policies that if they didn't know you, they kind of gave you third degree because they wanted to make sure, and usually there was two lesbian bars in one point in Canton. One of them was where the original original professional football game happened. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was a lesbian bar at one point. Okay, and they had a little thing behind there on the bar. I think I showed that.
Well, that's where
that's where they signed the first Hall of Fame agreement.
For professional.
For professional football, yeah.
That's no longer there.
Yeah, it's no longer there. The building's no longer there. We if we have known they were going to do that, we might have enshrined the building as a lesbian center. And again, a lot of the people going to the bars in Canton were from southern Ohio, New Philadelphia, Dover, there south towards West in that area, because there were no bars in Louisville, Ohio, or any of those places, so they would all come to Canton. So Canton at one point had a very, very large gay community at night, but many of them would, at the end of the bar, when the bar closed, would be heading back to their house. So that was a typical pattern. So and most gay men, I would say probably a third at least in Canton, would get married, have kids, and so forth, because they were, because of the way homosexuality was treated as a condition or whatever, they would not want that. Or they were religious, and they were, for example, Catholics were in that category, and other religions, Baptists were in that category. So they basically, you could tell between whether you could do a prediction of whether the person would be in the closet or get married based upon what religion they were. That was kind of a safe prediction there for a while. So these were things and issues you had to deal with. And I pretty much, I never really had any fear of being gay. I had fear of certain places I might go, the way they would treat gay people, but not afraid that, myself of being gay or thinking that there was something wrong with me.
Would you consider Canton a gay-friendly town?
It was kind of because it had the number of bars that it had and so forth. But now Canton only has one bar, and a lot of people in Canton go to Akron bars because there's just one in Canton. It doesn't do very well at this point, I don't think. As far as other bars coming in there, they just haven't done that. However, they've opened up a gay center, which is good. We spoke there actually 2 weeks ago was a talk on parents of trans children and why that community is being threatened the way it is and so forth. So that was a very interesting talk. Still doing talks. I'm not involved directly with, other than I got an award, alumni award at Kent. I got, was that last year?
Well, and Lavender graduation.
Lavender graduation, and I got an award for my my pictures now in the Student Center wall there for my activity in gay rights. It's 53 years late, but I got it. Okay, it's a nice glass rainbow thing that weighs umpteen pounds, but I got that and awarded. And then the gay community here supports Kent a lot. The way they do that is they'll have a fundraiser. For example, a bar called Cocktails in Akron recently, maybe 2 months ago now, they had they twice a year they'll have a Kent fundraiser, and usually it's one of the leather groups will be the host, and the money they raise that evening goes to Kent Special Fund, and that is for people who get thrown out of the house when their parents find out that they're gay and they need help to get through that quarter, to money to be for rent or for their dorm or whatever, and that goes to support that. And they raise sometimes $3,000-4,000 for that effort at one of these events. And Lee got kicked out of the house when he was found out to be gay. So that doesn't happen.
I was 20 at the time.
He was
old enough, but yeah.
That doesn't
I was
happen
going to Akron U.
quite as much as it used to, but still does. So those things happen. So there is a mixture between support for a lot of the gay bars of the community at Kent and vice versa. I went to the Kent branch there when it opened, and then after 2 years back then, you had to go to main campus, and that's how I made my way to main campus. And when you came in that particular order, what happens is they filled you into whatever room they could fill you in. And in my case, they filled me into Stouffer Hall, which was the jock dorm, jock in quotations, which I didn't mind because I came out in 1968 as into the gay community in Canton. So I was then part of Kent Stouffer Hall, but not out at all on campus to begin with. I took my senior year there, and then I entered into the graduate program for sociology. So that was the direction that I went. Meantime, I met Dolores. Dolores was picketing in a demonstration against the war in Vietnam, and I was also doing that, and that's kind of how we first started chatting a little bit. And then we also ran into each other in the hub, which was the old student center before they built the present one. And we had a few conversations there, and we got to know each other. And we kind of thought, one of the things we talked about was, hey, why aren't we, since we're both involved in these various other civil rights kinds of issues, why aren't we doing something about our own people? That was kind of like we need to start talking about that. Then we ran into a person, Gail Pertz, who was handing out leaflets about potentially doing a gay right kind of thing. So we got together with her, and the three of us, especially Dolores and I more than Gail, but the two of us, Dolores and I, talked about strategies, what we need, what we could do, and that kind of thing, and talked about starting a group, which we started in November. It would have been December of '71, after the shootings had occurred in '70. I was on campus at that time and was a witness to that incident. So Dolores and I talked about having a coming out meeting, which we started handing out leaflets and so forth, and that was held in the student center, the old student center, the hub they used to call it, and that was attended by approximately 75 people. We were pretty much surprised by that. We recognized pretty soon, early on, that we needed to appeal to more than just the campus community. We needed to appeal to the Northeastern Ohio gay community, because one of the things we wanted to do was have a coming out dance in January after we got organized. So at that first meeting, what we did was we wrote up a constitution, we wrote up rules and so forth. That's online. So we made the decision that anybody who was speaking for the organization had to use their name. Other members that were not publicly interfacing did not have to do that. but we thought it would be extremely important. Now, remember when this is. This is in the early 70s, so using your name and being an out person was a challenge for a lot of people. And then we went ahead and we planned our dance for January coming up. We recognized, because we aren't stupid and we were able to listen to what we're hearing around us and put some two and two together, we figured out that we were probably going to be challenged at our dance, possibly by fraternities. And then what other forms of homophobes that might have been out there, we don't know, but we didn't want to take a chance. So one of the things we did was we visited all of the gay bars in northeastern Ohio. That would be Cleveland, Canton, Youngstown, and Akron. And we told them what we were doing, and we invited anybody who wanted to come and take part. So consequently, we had in excess of 100 people show up for that first dance in January. So that was kind of our strategy to get things kicked off a little bit. Then a few weeks later, we received a call from Dr. Olds. He was the president of the university at that time, and he called us and he said he wanted to meet. Now, that's very unusual. I was a graduate student, and Dolores was a professor in the English department. So the two of us went to meet. And one of the things that, when we had our meeting with him, during the course of the meeting, he left the room. And on his desk was a folder, and it had our name on the outside. So we probably shouldn't have done this, but we did. We kind of took a little bit of a peek there. And what we discovered was there was a transcript of a talk that I had given in Cleveland when we were picketing 2 Fridays earlier at Cleveland on Public Square. We were picketing Dorothy full-time. She was a major newscaster in, I'm sure she's probably in your history thing here. She's a major newscaster in Cleveland, and she had influence in getting them to not publish a Doonesbury comic strip because it had a gay character. Well, we thought, well, this would be a good thing to maybe protest. And the other thing she did was she spoke negatively of Dolores and I and being starting up a Kent chapter or a Kent group for gay people, and she spoke negatively of that on TV. So we picketed her. Transcript of those speeches was in this file. So that told us, okay, we know where we're coming from here a little bit. We're being, I guess the right word would, monitored and so forth in such a way that we felt it's inappropriate for student organizations. We kind of ignored it a little bit. We went ahead and we planned our coming out meeting on campus, which was after the dance, and that was where we set up our meeting schedules. Our general meeting schedules were, we had a meeting every Tuesday night, okay, and that was in the Student Center. We needed to get offices in the Student Center. That was a struggle. The new Student Center was not there yet, so they put us in a smaller place next to Stouffer Hall. And what happened there was we couldn't get a phone. So it took a struggle, approximately 2 months to get a phone. They would give us a phone but not give the number out to anybody. It wouldn't go in student documentation or any of that stuff. Dr. Olds tried to convince us that because of the shootings that occurred, that enrollment may become an issue. And if we come out and are publicly seen, if Kent is seen as having homosexuals, quote, on the campus in any large numbers or whatever, that would be bad for enrollment. It's already a problem for enrollment because of what occurred on May 4th. So these are the kinds of things that Dolores and I were dealing a lot with early on. Then the way we structured the organization was we had Tuesday night general meeting. This is after we got in the new student center. They gave us an office. Then we had a Friday night men's and women's rap group. We called it a rap group. And that was where we would have a meeting. The one group could be for men only, and the other group was women only. And we met in the student center, and that was more directed towards individual conversations back and forth between the men about how they came out, what problems they might be having, and so forth. It was oriented towards basically direct interaction with members that wanted to do that. Then the other thing we decided very early on is we needed to set up our speakers bureau, because come out wherever you are was one of our first lines that we used. Our very first button was a come out button. I'm going to give you one of those today, so you can original one from back then. So we wanted to move from being the love that dared not speak its name to the love that wouldn't shut up. So that was basically our strategy, is to make a showing that we're here and we're not going anywhere. We chose the name Kent Gay Liberation Front because we had a lot of people that in the early days of our groups that were active in various other kinds of groups, like American Indian Rights Movement people kind of supported us. The Black United Students, after some probably a year's interaction back and forth, they became supporters. A couple organizations did not support us. The Revolutionary Communist Party people said that we were capitalist decadents, and that kind of thing we dealt with. We dealt with all those issues. But basically, we took the position, we've got to get out there. And so we held our coming out dance, which was well attended. Then what we started doing is making talks. Dolores and I probably did somewhere in the ballpark for the first year, 100 or more talks to all kinds of classes. We did to one high school talk. The high school talk was kind of interesting. That was in Ravenna at the high school there. And what happened one day, we got a call from the person who taught social studies. And he said, we know you started a group there in Kent, and do you provide a speaker? And we said, yes, we have a speakers bureau. We'll be happy to do that. But we're warning you, we don't believe that your principal is going to agree to this. Have you cleared this or whatever? And essentially he said, oh, no. He says, we're adults here, and we are teaching this course, and I don't think that's going to be an issue. Well, of course, 2 days later, guess what? We get a call back from the principal, and he says essentially, you can't appear here and do this. And we said, well, okay, but we don't think that it's appropriate for you to censor us from coming there and talking. So basically what happened was, at that point, he says, I'll call you back. So he calls us back the next day, and he says, no, we've talked about it. You're not allowed to come. So I said to him, okay, here's what we'll do in that case. Rather than coming there and speaking in the class, we'll simply come there with a picket and handing out leaflets to your entire student body, rather than just dealing with this class. And, of course, 2 days later, we get another call back, and he said we could do that. And so Dolores came and spoke, and it went over very well. So that's the kind of tactics that we had to use just to do a talk in the early days. I mean, there were other times that we had to deal with issues on campus. Like, one of the issues on campus was there was a phys ed teacher. I'm not going to talk about specific names. I'm just talking about there was a phys ed teacher, woman teacher. I think she was in charge of the phys ed department. And she was making it difficult for women that she suspected might be lesbian. She would not refer them when they graduated or wanting to go to another school or something like that. She would, if she thought they were lesbian, she would not make that referral. Well, we found that out because they came to us and complained, people from that department. So we basically talked to her. First, she wouldn't talk to us. So then the same routine, we had to threaten a picket in front of her office on a Friday afternoon, and she said, oh, well, maybe we'll talk. So we talked. So one of the very first things we asked her is, how do you know a person's a lesbian? How, what way are you using to make these judgments? And she says, well, yeah, I just know. She says, I could tell by the way they talk, the way they act, the way they dress, and so forth. So we dealt with her. So this is the kind of thing we were doing in the early stages of our organization. The other thing we did was, very early on, we created a thing called Town Hall, which was a group of people that would answer the phone and they would give advice or help. Somebody calls about discrimination against them or something like that. Also, eventually it tied in with the psychological support people on campus, and they became Town Hall 1 and Town Hall 2. And so that was like an adjunct group to us that we referred people to. So that we did very early on. Some other kinds of things we did. I was teaching a course as a graduate student. Normally, a graduate student has maybe 25 to 30 students, somewhere in that ballpark. So I taught that for the first session, and then I got a call before the next quarter started saying, we need to talk to you. So I went in and we started talking, and they said, would you mind teaching a little larger course? They said, we've heard your lecture style and we think that would be appropriate. And right now, numbers is a big issue because after the shootings, the department gets its funding based upon the number of enrollments into their particular specialty. So would you agree to doing a larger class? So I'm thinking they'll give me 40 students or something like that. They gave me a classroom in Bowman Hall that had 120 seats. So I had 80 to 90 students. I says, hey, I don't have a graduate student here, guys. I mean, to help me. I am a graduate student. How am I going to do this and, without some kind of support? And then they mumbled back and forth for a while. Then they said, is there something you want? And I said, yes. I said, I want to teach a course on the topic of my choice, and a small one, either, for grad students or for a smaller class, but I want it to be a topic of my choice. And that's the only thing I want. Well, they thought that was great. They did not think enough to figure out what I might want to do. So what I told them I wanted to teach was sociology of homosexuality. That created a department meeting. Okay, so then we had the grad students fortunately took my side. And so eventually, after about 2 weeks of debate back and forth and whatever, I got an agreement to do that. So I ended up teaching a course on sociology of homosexuality. Now, in sociology, you call that deviant behavior, sociology of deviance. Deviance meaning how far you are removed from the norm, not anything too negative about the use of that word. They didn't, in the catalog, they didn't put sociology of homosexuality. And I became one of the first in the country to have a course like that was their specific target. The guy at Berkeley beat me by 2 weeks. And I make this joke. I said, I was looking to Tanya Harding him at some point, but that was a joke I used to use. Because the other thing we discovered very early on, if we're going to do this, one of the things that's a main ally that we have is humor. So Dolores and I specifically worked on putting humor into our presentations. And we spoke to an unbelievable number of different kinds of groups. One of them was Mansfield Reformatory. Bob Laycock, who was a member of our group, and Dolores and I went to Mansfield Reformatory to speak. They had I don't know if you're familiar with the terminology, a sort of homosexual panic at the prison, and they wanted us to come and speak to both the prisoners and the staff. So we did that talk, and that was one of the one I felt the most threatened at that we did, because you literally, cell door and then go to the next one, go to the next one. We spoke to them for about 4 hours, to probably 60 inmates, and then after that, then to the staff. So that was an unusual talk we did. There were quite a few talks that we did. We went to the Kinsey Institute and visited there and met with them. They wanted to find out what we were doing, so we did that. And that was Dr. Knoll and I and Bob, so the three of us went there. Early on, we were beginning to get a reputation, so we went to all of the gay bars in Ohio. We told them what we were doing. Can I give you some examples of what happened to us at some of the talks? Because I think you'll find them interesting and get a feel for the color of what was happening here. One of the things, we got a call from Akron U. And Akron U people wanted us to come and do a talk. What they told us was that they had their cafeteria on the first floor. On the second floor in that building, they had a stage and tables, and you could get your lunch downstairs and take it upstairs to listen to the Friday speaker. So they wanted Dolores and I to come and talk to them about what Kent was doing as far as gay rights go. And we agreed to come and do the talk, but we warned them. Same thing we're used to doing here. We said, look, you have to be prepared because not everybody is going to be happy that you're having us speak at your school. So basically they said, oh, no problem, no problem. So we said, are you sure? And we emphasized that. We even made it a practice to call a second time a couple days later to get a feel for the intervening things that might have happened. And then we got the real truth about how they felt about it when we made that second call. So we called and they said, oh, no problem, come on down. So we go down there to do our talk. It's on a Friday afternoon. The room maybe seated more than 150 people. It was probably closer to 200. It was a big room that they had up there. And so we come in the back. What they did was they brought you in the back, then you walked up front to the stage, and then you did your presentation. Well, what happened was when we came into the back of the room, there were 40 or 50 people thumping Bibles. Like, that's a real thing. I thought it was not a real thing, but it is a real thing. That's what they were doing. So they were trying to drown us out. So Dolores and I went up to the front to the stage, and Dolores says, Bill, you handle this. Now, the reason she did that was when I was growing up, my mom and dad used the Canton Baptist Temple as their babysitter because it was right up the street from where we live, the first Canton Baptist Temple. So they sent us to daily vacation Bible school and all the things that were involved in that. So we got a Southern Baptist education, and I knew the Bible extremely well. So one of the things that we did with this group of people thumping their Bibles is Dolores said, Bill, you handle this one, because she let me handle religious kind of issues more than she did at that point. So I said, okay. So what I did was I pointed my finger to the people in the back. I said, see those people in the back there? I'm going to quote a biblical passage from memory. And if you think that's something acceptable, you turn around to them and you go like this. Okay, if you think that's something crazy or something that's not appropriate in any way, turn around and go like this. So I started with Leviticus, and the particular passage was when women enter the house of worship, they should keep their head covered and mouth shut. Well, that got a portion of the women on our side already. Then I started doing more of those. Then I said, wait a minute, you guys back there are thinking, well, he's quoting the Old Testament. It really is the New Testament that we go by. I said, for you people thinking that, you've got the red letter version of the King James Bible that has passages in red that Jesus said and God supposedly said. Okay, you have those passages. So I'm going to quote some of those. So then I looked at my audience and I said, okay, I'm going to quote what God said about slavery, what Jesus said about some of those issues. I started doing that. I did a few more of those, and by that time, the Bible thumpers all fled. They left. Years later, we found out it was the Ernest Angley people and Reverend Rex Humbert people who were part of that group back there. And you can search history a little bit and see what Ernest Angley eventually did. I'm not going to repeat it or give you an idea. Look it up. Okay. So these were the kinds of things that we did. These were the techniques we used when we were doing our talks. We were invited to talk to many campus classrooms. Another thing we did was we had, how the psychology department would have group sessions, and they would talk, as a group to students who are having issues and so forth. So one of the concerns that we had was that people who were psychologists never really met healthy homosexuals. They met people who came in who had issues. So we basically felt that, well, maybe we should, those of us who feel like we're healthy or there's nothing wrong with being gay, will join one of the group sessions, which we did. We met Franklin Kameny. He's the grandfather of the gay rights movement. He came to our campus one day, just out of the blue, stayed a week, and that was I'm giving you some examples of some of the people in the movement that we met. We met Carla J. and Alan Young. We met all kinds of people that usually I've got a list to remember all these people that would come to Kent. A lot of people started making a pilgrimage to Kent after the shootings. They basically viewed that as a thing to do in the gay community. Elaine Noble came there. These are people that, if you know a little bit about the gay rights movement, they were nationally known in the movement. So we had once a year we would have a conference which we'd opened, and that would be usually a 3-day thing, like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday kind of thing. That would be held in the Student Center. We became the largest student organization on campus, and we always had our office staffed. A lot of the student groups had it staffed during the daytime and then disappear. So we basically staffed 24 hours, or not 24 hours, from 6 in the morning to midnight, I think, and then we had to be out of the building. But I think that's the way that we kept our activity going, monitored, and so forth. See some other things we did. Back a little bit to my course on sociology of homosexuality, which is what I called it. Basically, I said we're going to do a field trip. We're going to pretend that we are, Margaret Mead's friends, and we're going to do a trip to a gay bar. That class had about 40 students in it. Probably a third of them might have been gay. Others were interested in taking that as a course. So we made our field trip. We pull into the parking lot at the bar that we were having the field trip to. It was called Mother's. Mother's at that time was probably the most popular gay bar in northeastern Ohio. Okay, it was in Akron, downtown Akron. We pulled in there. Next to the bar was a storefront church, fundamentalist storefront church. We pull in, we get out of the car to go across the street to the bar. 2 police cars pull out of the driveway on both sides of the bar, and with their lights blaring. They come over and they say, "You folks are jaywalking." And we said, "Yes." Now, we noticed that there was a fundamentalist church there and the bar was here. If you were going to the fundamentalist church, they just let you go. They said, to us, "Where are you going?" We said, "We're going to the gay bar." They said, "That's jaywalking." There were 3 police cars and maybe 5 officers or whatever. So we said, "We're going to the gay bar." They said, "That's jaywalking. That's a $50 fine. And if you pay the fine and so forth, your name will not appear in tomorrow's Akron Beacon Journal. But otherwise, your name will appear there saying that you're going to a homosexual establishment." Then we said no. I talked to my 2 students who were with me. Fortunately, they had similar opinions about this issue. And they said, "No, we're not going to do that. Are you kidding me? You're not saying anything to the people going over there to the church. Why are you doing this?" And they said, "Well, it's jaywalking." So then we said, "No, we're not going to pay." Okay, it's as simple as that. As far as warning us that our picture is going to appear in the paper, did you watch the news last Friday night on TV at noon? We were picketing in Public Square in Cleveland. So and my button right here, the little pink one, says, come out wherever you are. So I said, "We don't care if you let that be known." So then they huddled a little bit and came back and said, $40. So we said, "No." What part of no do you not understand? So this kept going and going and going. They got down to $10. I'm not making this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up. Okay, $10. We said, "No, there's no way we're going to do that. We want, give us a jury trial," is what we said, something to that effect. And so they took us away in a paddy wagon. They took us downtown, put us in a cell, my students and myself. Then what happened, maybe 20 minutes later, they kept asking us, and they said they threatened us with our picture appearing in the paper. Now think about when this was. If homosexual men who were not out yet had their picture appear in the newspaper because they went to a rest stop or because they were arrested going into a gay bar, that for them many times would be possibly even result in suicide because family would find out. Remember, huge portion of the gay community at that time was closeted and simply not, many of them married. So basically, this scare tactic they were using would work because of a fear of being in the newspaper kind of thing. We didn't fear that, so that made it a little harder for them. Then what happened, the judge comes down to try to talk us into this. Judges don't do that. Usually you go up there to be arraigned and whatever, but he came down. He also tried to talk us out of it. He said that we said, no, we want a jury trial. So then he took us up to the court a couple hours later to be arraigned. He arraigned us, and so we were basically set for trial. He tried to talk us out of it a long time, couldn't do it, and so we basically said, no, we want a jury trial. And he scheduled a jury trial. In the meantime, we got a phone call from a woman named Thelma Furry. She is an attorney in Akron. She was an attorney in Akron, but not just an attorney. She calls us and she says, I want to take your case. And out of the blue, she calls us, and I'm thinking, who is this? And she said she was a famous attorney. And I said, well, we don't have a lot of money to pay attorneys or anything. And she said, well, I'll tell you what, you don't have to. I have a lesbian friend who's in her 60s, and I've never made any effort to find out anything about the community. So if you take me to a lesbian bar and introduce me to the community a little bit, I will, take your case for nothing. And I said, A, this is a crazy person. B, I better do some research. I did a little bit of research, and I found out she was a very high-level attorney. She had tried a case before House Un-American Activities Committee and won, McCarthy era. Then also she tried 2 lesbian cases where she was, the children were involved and they were deciding who got custody. Now her archives are in the Akron Library. She's passed away since then. She took our case. We weren't stupid. We understood that we have closet people out there that can be good allies. So we did a little bit of work to find closeted people in the fundamentalist church because the police talked to them and they gave them a different story. The fundamentalist closet case that we talked to said, oh, well, the police said they were doing this because they were being paid $100, number one. And number two, the reason they were doing it was because the Akron Soapbox Derby is coming to town, and we want to make sure that we clean up the streets in Akron and we don't get a reputation for harboring homosexuals establishments. So they asked us if we were going to the church, and they let us go. So she had us plead differential enforcement, was the main legal argument that we used, and we won. So we got a cease and desist order from the judge for protecting the 4 gay bars that were in Akron at that time, and we got our little announcement in the paper. So that was one of the kinds of things we did. Now I'm trying to give you a flavor of some of the things we did related to the community. We felt if we support the community supports us, and we found that out to be the case. Now back to Kent itself. We now were, interacting with the community that didn't understand much about gay people or whatever, because this was 1972, 73, along in there and so forth. So we did a thing called a ZAP. I don't know, a lot of people aren't familiar with the term ZAP, but what a ZAP was, it was a strategy that was used by Kent Gay Liberation Front and the other groups out there that were doing gay rights kind of work. What a ZAP was is to get 20 or 30 people, pick a bar, and Kent was like Bar City back then, pick a bar and go there on a Wednesday night or a Thursday night or whatever as a group. And that was called a ZAP. Reason we did that was to simply interface with the community without hiding who we were. And so we did probably 15 or 20 of those to the various bars in Kent. We generally had no problems. Every now and then we'd get a little bit of shouting. Then the other thing we did is we demanded to be able to talk to the fraternities. So we got an invitation to do that. So that went very, very well. And we started working on the student body. We got a few other things that would happen. A lot of the certain departments were still closety, for example, theater. So some of the theater people would see Dolores and I, they'd go across to the other side of the street because they were afraid of the stereotypes that if they were seen talking to one of the two of us, that they might be labeled because they went to gay bars and so forth. But there was a thing that was going on back then that a lot of people don't understand. If you were a homosexual and you're coming out in Ohio, chances are fairly large for the total population we have, that a lot of people would graduate and leave Ohio. They would go to New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego. Those were Maine and Florida. So main areas that they would escape Ohio and leave as soon as they graduate. The other thing that would happen is they would not go to a gay bar in their town. This very thing that would happen is the Akron people would not go to gay bars in Akron because they would be afraid an aunt or an uncle might see them going into the bar. So they would go to the Canton bars. The Cleveland people would go to the Akron bars. A lot of people don't understand that dynamic there, but that was the way it was. And so what happened was Canton actually at one point had the most bars. They had 6 gay bars at one point. And they were people from like Dover, New Philly, and south of there, and people from Akron. The Youngstown people went to Pittsburgh. So that was the thing. And back then when you went to a gay bar, when we first started doing this, they had the little thing that they would slide and look. If they knew who you were, they would let you in. If they didn't know you, they would ask you to name 3 gay bars in Ohio. So if you could do that, then they thought, well, you know something about the gay community, they let you in. If not, they would, and a lot of the gay bars were numbers, like the 640 Club, the 520 Club, and so forth. So these are the kinds of things we tried to change. The way we tried to change that and make it more comfortable is we started speaking at the gay bars. So Kent would actually have a delegation of Kent people that would go to that bar and do a presentation. I'll give you one example of one we did in Akron. There was a bar there called Satan's Den. So Dolores and I were asked to come there and speak about what was going on at Kent and why they should support it and so forth. So we went there on a Friday night. Dolores gave the talk that night. We sat down next to where the woman that was at the door that was carding people, and the bouncer, I guess you'd call her. She was there at the door as people came in. Now, I'm using some of the terminology of that time, not present day. Okay, so we were sitting there, we did our talk, we're sitting there, we're listening to what's going on over by the door, and this guy comes in. He said he wants to come in. She said, this is a lesbian bar, and generally we are not open to males, but he persisted a little bit, so she said, if you want to come in, you got to promise that you will not make passes at the femmes. The femmes was a term used back then for women who exhibited a certain set of characteristics. So Dolores and I are both thinking that's not going to go well. Well, of course, he comes in. 5 minutes later, maybe 10 minutes, hassle on the dance floor. He tries to pick up the butch half of that, and I'm using the terms of that day. Okay, and that caused a hassle. So he comes back and he starts talking to the woman at the door, and she says, you have to leave. He said, I'm not leaving. She said, yes, you are. She says, we have the right to control who's in here and so forth. So after a big discussion, he left. So I looked at Dolores and I said, this is not going to end well. So this guy had an Akron U frat shirt on. So 20 minutes later or so, maybe a half hour, 6 frat guys come from Akron U. Okay, and they come in and I'm saying, oh, this is not looking good. So what happened was one of my favorite things I've seen. The women threw them out on the street. The cops come, 3 cruisers and a bunch of cops. The cops come and they say, what happened? And they're talking, and they see us sitting there, and we look out of place because Dolores looked like your grandmother, and I look like a nerd of some kind. So we're sitting there, and they ask us if we saw what happened, and we told them. And so then they talked to the frat guys a little bit, then they talked to the bar management and so forth. And so then what they ended up telling the frat guys was, we're debating right now whether to call the other frats and tell them you were beat up by a bunch of women. And something to that effect. And if you ever come back here again, we have your names and you'll be in trouble. So slowly the police department started changing some of a way that it treated our community. It did not do that before we made issues to complain about things. And we were doing that. If we thought something was inappropriate or should not have been done, we didn't care if the police knew who we were and that we were gay. Those of us who were on the road to being public and out there and not caring. So Akron, you basically never did have a gay organization to the same extent that Kent did. But we always did things when they wanted a speaker or something, we would come over and do that at Akron. Okay, and if you spoke for the group, you had to use your full name. Because how would it sound if you were Mr. X and you were talking about coming out and so forth? So you had to use your full name. So we basically used the following format. We said, okay, we're going to do some things here, and to the class. We said, one thing we want you to do is to take your hand and put it on the shoulder of the person next to you. So we got everybody in the room to do that. And then we said, now you know what? A certain percentage of you, and according to Kinsey, it's probably about 6%, have your hand on the shoulder of somebody who's gay. You don't know that. There's a reason you don't know that, because they're in the closet. The reason that they're in the closet, and then we went into a discussion of the way homosexuals are treated and so forth. So we used that one. Then we went to the next slide, which was religion. We said, we know many of you are religious out there, and you have a position that homosexuality is something that's going to damn us to hell and so forth. You take that position, and you quote the Bible, which usually incorrectly, but you try that, and you do things. And I said, you're the cause of people who are younger committing suicide. Because many of the people who commit suicide do so because they're considered worthless by their religion and by the family that follows that religion, and they are put in a position where sometimes that is so bad that they do that. So you're kind of responsible for that. And oh, by the way, just another question: if your God out there is so great, why did 60,000 young people below the age of 10 die of malnutrition this week? We would use some of those kind of arguments. And we would also say, look, you're quoting a Bible, and you're trying to tell people basically, how to live their life. They may not believe in the particular religion you do. And by the way, how do you explain the fact there are 1,800 religions, only one could be right? So start applying some logic to your own belief system, then come back and tell us what you think about homosexuals, okay? So that would be the kind of argument we would use for that particular thing. The next thing we would do is the mental illness thing, and then we would use Evan Hooker studies on that one. So we wanted to get out a certain amount of overall kind of knowledge type thing, and then we got into what my life was like, how I came out, and gave personal interaction kind of things. And we would start asking them questions. Have you ever known a homosexual? How many people know somebody who's gay? We start doing it that way. One of the early fights we had, not fights, but I guess, yeah, fights, difference of opinion was how to deal with getting marriage equality passed. So when they first started doing ads and working on marriage equality, they took basically an argument which was political and which was a logical, statistically kind of thing. And we said, and many of us said, no. You got to talk about this, like your couple there. You got to talk about this guy here and say, look, if his other half dies or gets in the hospital with a serious illness, he can't even go to the hospital because he's not legally the husband. He does not in any way related. So we started using ads which were emotional and talking about everything in those terminology. When that started happening, we started winning the marriage fight in various states, and that's what they did in California too. And they moved from the using logical political reasoning to using emotional. They would bring a person whose other half, just the situation I just explained. They would bring them up there and they would explain how sad it was that they couldn't even. The other one they would do is other half who would be together for 30, 40 years. One of them dies. The parents come in and take the property because there's no way that their ownership could be joint, that kind of thing. So once you started using these kinds of arguments, you open a little bit of an emotional connection to, and also you talk to them about, hey, you probably have a relative out there, you need to lighten up on some of this. Because if you say homosexuality is an illness, well, if you say X is an illness, whatever that might be, you don't attack them because they're ill, but yet homosexuals that you think is ill, you attack. Okay, what's the difference? Where's your logic in that? So that's the kind of talk and kind of thing that we did in terms of activism. Does that make sense, I guess?
Yeah.
But it took a while to get to that.
Yeah.
We didn't start out that way. And I think it was the time that we started organizing on university campuses that made major change in the way people would talk to their parents when they go back home. And another one that Kent did, which surprised me, but they did it very early on, was they put in the pamphlet you get when you're a new freshman, they had an article in there and they had things that where the gay community center on campus is located and, when their meetings are, and all of that was right there in the guide that they gave to the freshmen and, everybody else. So that was a major turning point in my opinion, because parents would come to their, to the thing where they introduce you, and they would always include that as a part of that introduction. They didn't do that originally. We had to fight for that to happen and be part of it. So now you wanted me to go talk a little bit about
Talk about Dolores.
Dolores.
Yeah.
Okay, Dolores. If you met Dolores, she was kind of soft spoken. She looked like a grandmother type, although she was a little bit athletic. One of the things that she did was she formed an intramural basketball team made up of lesbians called the Lavender Menace. So they would play in intramural games against the other houses, sorority, fraternity houses. So she was, I don't mean to say she was, invalid or anything like that, but she came across as quiet. She taught Chaucerian English and other topics in the English department. She came out when she was teaching. She dealt with several issues related to that, and she handled all those pretty well. She and I were the original two spokespersons for the group, and we would take turns. Sometimes we'd talk as two of us together. If the group was going to be not harmful would be the wrong word, threatening in any way, we would both go. And she was like, another thing, she was empathetic. One of the things we would do is when we had a meeting, she would sometimes hang outside in the hallway. She would sit there with a book. Reason she would do that was we could tell when somebody was nervous about coming in. They would walk up and they would walk down and they would kind of look in and, they would you could tell that they were closeted to some extent and nervous. And Dolores would always spot them. She would figure that out. And she would casually get into a conversation with them and make them feel good enough that they would come into our meeting. And that's a tactic that she and I discussed, and she was the one who put that tactic forward and really, really good at it. She would make them feel, that they're not threatening to go in. Sometimes if they were extreme closet cases, we would arrange a meeting for a few of them to meet with her so that she could I don't know what the best calm them down would be one start, and then she could get them to where they felt comfortable in coming to a meeting or whatever. She also was very, very good at handling the fraction that took place between men and women in the gay rights movement. There were the radical lesbian portion of the movement, and the gay men, and there were kinds of things between them that things did not always go well. Some places they went so bad that the radical lesbians would not have anything to do on the campus with the regular gay group and so forth. So she was very very important in getting Kent Gay Lib to be open enough that we didn't do things that did not allow radical lesbians or feminism to be part of our group. So we have rules. We always had to have a co-chairwoman and a co-chairman. We also had a separate rap group on Friday night. We have women's rap and men's rap. Men weren't allowed in women's rap and women in men's. Now that may sound sexist or whatever, but there was a reason for that, because the way that you come out as a gay man versus the way you come out as a lesbian had different nuances to it, and therefore we needed to treat differently. The other thing we did is we did a lot of pickets against gay bars that discriminated against lesbian women. One was in Akron that I remember doing, and they didn't allow women in, and they carded black people, but not white people. Well, Kent Gay Lib did not like that. We took that as a position that our community should not be guilty of doing some of the things that we're fighting over there. They're doing it over here. So we picketed the bar in Akron that did that. I forget the name of that bar. But then we also picketed, several of our lesbian women got terminated from their job, and we picketed those, and we helped. The lesbian bars are under attack. They were, and we dealt with that issue where guys would think they could go in and pick up a woman kind of thing. We dealt with those kinds of issues. We dealt with the issues of closeted people who were wanting to understand whether their profession would support them or not support them. So we made it an effort to research the various kinds of departments and making a decision that we needed to have a little bit more talks done in that department rather than this department. In other words, we needed to talk to the women's athletic department a little bit more than we might talk to fashion department. We made some stereotypical choices, but they were supported a little bit by evidence. That we started to target the psychology department a little bit, because they would have rules that they would want the people who were going into psychiatric or psychological field to be questioned about sexual preference, which we viewed as inappropriate. And so we kind of worked with psychology people and how that we thought that they should be doing what they were doing. Now that may sound kind of pushy, but that was where the issues came up. We also dealt with the other movements that were on campus. We supported the American Indian Rights Movement. They, in turn, supported us. We had supported handicap support. They, in turn, came to our dances in a large number and really had a good time. And we had dances on campus in the Student Center. One time, we did have an attack against our dance. Wenda Gaylord was the chairperson then, and the dance got smoke bombs thrown in the Student Center. And what happened, Wendy fortunately worked for the Student Center, so she knew an exit to get them out the back door. But it did result in one of the people at the dance having a heart attack, and some of them, having a little bit of smoke inhalation. They later discovered that was done by Marines, ROTC Marine guys. They were all thrown off campus, out of school. So one of the things we started doing was taking a closer look at ROTC, how that operated. They did not like homosexuals, so they didn't like people who were, for personal reasons, religious reasons, were pacifist and so forth. So we got myself, pacifist, and a minister, and we went and tried to join ROTC. Well, they wouldn't accept us. So we made that was a good chance for a picket because they're using student funds and they're part of the university. What do you mean I can't come in there? So these are the kinds of issues that we took on. Wide range of those, but those are some that I remember. So the one ROTC one was kind of fun. I actually got a letter from military telling me I was not allowed within 100 yards of a military establishment, okay, because we picketed their table. They would put a table in the student center. Then they would have join ROTC and that kind of thing. And then what happened? Kent Gay Lib was trying to start up. We couldn't get a table assigned there. We had to fight for the table, so they put our table next to the ROTC table. So the ROTC, they had a pamphlet on it basically saying who's eligible, and physically actually said that certain people should not consider their organization. So we basically said, aha, here's another target we have to deal with. And then the other thing that happened to us is we were developed FBI files. I have one. So for a program called COINTELPRO, which was a investigation of student organizations like Socialist Workers and Young Socialists and gay rights and various organizations on campus that in any way political would be checked out and targeted. There's an FBI paper that talks about Kent Gay Lib. So we basically did that. And other things, some of us had to change our lifestyles politically. I, for example, back in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, most people, yippies and others, they would smoke something other than cigarettes, okay? We would not do that. Reason would be if they wanted to get us for something, okay, that would be something that they would use because politically they wouldn't know how to, control you with any other kind of laws related to homosexuality or whatever. But if they found you smoking a joint, you better believe, and they knew you were in the leadership of this group, there was enough homophobia out there that you would be a target. So we didn't allow any of we did not want any of our staff that were, the co-chair people or doing anything that got them, gave the FBI and those who supported it a reason for going after us, or the police for that matter. So those are the kinds of things we did. But we understand here in Columbus that the Columbus people need to do something here because we are being threatened by the laws that are now being worked on in the legislature here. We know about that, and we're working on some responses. One of the things that they're going to try to do is there's a couple of people would like to do this, at the Gay Pride event that they have at Akron, they have this big stage that at the beginning they open it up, and sometimes they have drag queens there at the opening ceremony. Somebody here at the legislature is going to try to put forward a position saying that can be seen by younger people who are adolescents, and we don't want, And then the Don't Say Gay bill is an issue that's happening here being talked about now. Actually, a draft of that bill's on plan. And then the other thing that's happening here is the attack against restrooms. That bill's possibly going to be coming forward. We just had the one bill vetoed for the abortion bill. That was it, the abortion bill. No, the other gay bill. I can't think of which one it is now. The Don't Say Gay thing, which might be coming up, and we believe the governor now would veto some of these things, but it got passed over top of his veto. So Ohio needs some work. We're in a situation where the way that we're structured, because of 88 counties, of those 88 counties, a certain proportion of them are not necessarily gay friendly, and I'm being nice, okay, are not necessarily gay friendly. You could still drive through southern Ohio and see. We saw one yesterday. We saw a big sign that said
Down 71.
down 71 against gay marriage. Still, so you have still a ways to go here in Ohio. And my hope is the university communities get back on their horses a little bit and start organizing. I don't know about Ohio State's present situation, but start organizing because we're going to have fights. And I think we now have four counties in Ohio that have the Mothers, was it Mothers of Liberty?
Mothers of Liberty.
Yeah, Mothers of Liberty is now in 4 counties in Ohio. One of them is Stark County and Summit County. Those two, this county, they're basically are going to try to do the Don't Say Gay in schools here in Ohio. So if you're smart and you are able to go to their website with a little bit of work, you can find the names of the people who are doing this. In Stark County, 2 of them ran for the Board of Education. One got elected, the other one did not. But these people need to be addressed, and we have to repoliticize our. If I had a message that get out, it would be we have to repoliticize our movement to the extent that they are out there working because these threats are coming. And it's necessary for us to do things. And one of the things we need to do is to work on those areas that are the way things used to be. One of the things Anita Bryant originally did was to preach that the children were in danger. What we had happen was 7 different states had gay legislation passed. Anita Bryant found, then they were going to try to do it in Miami. Anita Bryant found out that this was happening. She was an evangelical religious person, orange lady, I call her. She, that matches somebody's hair is orange, but that's a different story. Anyhow, so what happened was she organized in Miami, and they actually defeated the bill that was to give employment protection and other things in the city of Miami. First one that lost. 7 state victories kind of in a row, and then that one lost. So then she went to the California. The Briggs Initiative issue came up out there, and they were trying to put a law in the books that actually said this. If you were a teacher and homosexual, you could not. If you advocated in any way, shape, or form publicly for homosexuality, you could not be a teacher in the state of California. And there were several more punitive kinds of things. We were asked to come to California, okay, which is why we left Kent, quit what we were doing. We quit our jobs, and away we went. And we were asked to come and help organize the opposition to the Briggs Initiative. And that's when we started doing speeches, spoke on a lot of campuses.
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, San Diego area, that area. And then Morris Kite was the one who was like the gay person in Los Angeles who was the one that historically was the most active politically there. He helped organize the first Christopher Street March in Hollywood. We helped with that. McCadden Avenue, where he lived, was near us, so we would meet there and work on political strategies to. That's when they started changing and started doing things about people's personal lives rather than political arguments. We did emotional arguments, and it worked. And even Ronald Reagan ended up supporting eliminating that law that they had passed.
Can you answer the question, how do you feel about how we've progressed since you started?
Well, obviously we've come a long way in a variety of areas. One is simply the widespread acceptance of gay people by the younger generation. We could go to a gay bar, for example, in Akron, and probably a third to a half of that bar, it's a very crowded bar, are people who are not gay. There are younger gay people who have friends who are gay, or they come there to dance because the dance music's better than at their local bar, and they have no qualms whatsoever about interacting with gay people. A lot of that has to do with the TV and the way that Hollywood over time, presented a more open picture of gay people. I even bought a picture to give you of me standing next to a certain Hollywood person to see if you can figure out who it is. And she was very early activist on AIDS, and we were. Another thing we did when we went out there was we were activists in fighting AIDS and so forth. So basically, the other thing is I think we need a little more progress. We need in smaller towns, rural areas. We need to know how to deal with the political situation where when you have 88 counties, probably 60 of them are going to be harboring gay feelings about gay people, which are not as positive as maybe they should be. So how do you deal with that? How you deal with the fact that we have an electoral college. So these are some of the political issues that we're eventually going to have to challenge, because my vote does not count the same if I live in California, which is a gay-friendly state, as your vote in West Virginia does. Not even close when it comes to picking a person. We're under a real threat now if the Supreme Court, the way it exists, is very real chance that they may decide to go backwards on marriage. Because if a certain person becomes president, he will do anything he can to please the fundamentalist and extremists who are not happy with the way that the laws now read. And a lot of those are located, guess where? In southern Ohio. I mean, that's something we need to think about how to deal with. It's changing, but it's not changing fast enough. So, and again, it's the old thing. A lot of people from Ohio who are graduating in various fields, they don't stay here. I'm talking about gay people. They don't stay here. Why should they? In many cases, particularly if they live in a place that is more rural, they get the hell out because they can't do and live the lifestyle. Their chance of finding, if they're a guy, their chance of finding a husband fairly easily is not as good in a county that's like on the Ohio River, excluding Cincinnati, along the Ohio River, as it would be if they were in Cleveland or whatever. And also their ability to find maybe a more pleasant environment to socialize in is not as good in many cases. Now you got exceptions. Obviously Columbus and Cleveland and Akron and Youngstown and others are exceptions. But in general, Ohio is still behind in that sense. You don't feel threatened that somebody's going to attack you because you're homosexual. You feel threatened that your ability to have more options in your life are hindered. I think that best word for it. And one thing, again, I don't know what people listening, religions are and so forth, but many of us view religion as a major part of the problem. And fortunately, young people are leaving religion as far as those that are preaching against us, against gay people, are leaving those religions in drove. And I've talked to many of them, and they'll tell you the same thing. They'll say, I had gay friends. What they were telling me in church makes no sense because I know these people, and they aren't like that, okay? It's just the story that you're telling about X, Y, and Z, I simply don't understand because they aren't like that. I could see TV, programs, computer all the time, and I can see and interact with a population of friends that don't feel this way. So I think our best chances are, and it's already happening, that the younger generation is going to be the new saviors of our community. So it's not going to be university campuses in the same way, although they'll be supportive. It's going to be younger people saying, hey, enough of this, and just leaving the church, okay? And that's beginning to happen. And again, it's partially their fault, the church's fault, for preaching things which can be contradicted by physical evidence and just looking around. So, and that's happening.